So you have that perfect black forest lot. Now it's time for the blueprint. Designing that perfect Colorado custom home floor plan is not just about finding the right template. It just doesn't exist. It's about designing a floor plan that fits your lifestyle and the scenery on your specific lot. So today I'm going to give you 5 tips that are going to help you go from just that basic indoor-outdoor advice to truly a custom home floor plan that it's worth that 7-figure price tag. Building a custom home in Colorado isn't just about floor plans. It's about creating the lifestyle you've always pictured. We break down the process, the choices, and the real costs so you can build with confidence. I'm Chris Beresford, and this is Colorado Custom Homes. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris Beresford, and today we're going to talk about floor plans. Now, for some people, this is by far the most exciting part of the entire custom build process, and for other people, it's just plain boring. But there's one top level piece of advice that I got to tell you before we start any of this is that remember, you're designing a floor plan for yourself and how you live and how your family lives. So don't think that there's this perfect template and don't let anybody tell you that there is this perfect template. The goal today is we're going to talk through some of these things to consider whenever you're working with your architect or designer to make sure that your floor plan fits what you're looking for and also fits a custom home build in Colorado. So everybody knows in Colorado the standard indoor-out concept. You want to have your lifestyle kind of flow in from your house, outside, and vice versa. But you've got to go a step beyond that. So the tip number 1 I'm going to give is think about your view corridor. So you can see here today, we've got a nice flat lot with a huge view of Pikes Peak back behind me. So think about what it is on your specific lot that you want to be focused on. Is it a mountain view? Is it a forest view? Maybe a pond or a lake that you're looking at? Think about what that view corridor is, and it's the number 1 reason I always recommend that you select the lot first before you design your build. The last thing you want to do is get really far down this path on the design and then realize that once you select your lot, that design doesn't really work anymore. You could waste a ton of dollars doing that. And it's another reason that your architect is a critical choice in this whole part of the build. If your architect's local, they need to walk the site with you. They need to have what we say boots on the ground to make sure they truly understand exactly what that lot is and your vision for it. Now, if your architect's not local, then you may be in a situation where you need to provide them all the information about the lot, the topography, where exactly your build site's going to be, what's your vision for the view corridor, what you want to be the focal point of the home. You have to provide all that information if you use an architect that's not local, which is totally fine, but just realize it's a little bit more work on your side of things. Now, the other thing I encourage people to think about is don't just think you have to stick with what is kind of a normal floor plan. If because of your view, like I said, this view of the mountains or whatever it is in your area, if there's something you want to be the focal point, you can design your house around that. Don't feel like the floor plan can't change. Maybe you need to change the great room a little bit, or maybe you need to change the orientation of the kitchen some, or maybe even the master bedroom. You really shouldn't be afraid of moving those pieces of the home around to make sure that the floor plan is still functional for your lifestyle, but that you also capture that huge view in the parts of the house that you're going to spend probably 95% of the time. Another thing in Colorado you have to think about whenever you're designing your house and your floor plan is your garage and driveway. It may seem like kind of a silly thing, and we talked about view corridor and how important it is, but I will tell you right now, a south-facing driveway in Colorado is a wonderful thing. And I know this isn't just Colorado either. It's pretty much a northern hemisphere thing, I guess, really. So having a south-facing driveway means that it's going to melt off a lot faster. You're not going to be out there shoveling as much. And this is coming from a position of experience. When my wife and I built our last custom home, the one that we're in currently right now, I thought, you know what? I want the house to be a certain way. And yeah, I know my driveway is going to be facing north, but I'm okay with that. And now, after being in that house for 3 years, it drives me crazy all the time because there's, from our garage doors out to the edge of the concrete, if you will, and it's kind of a side entry garage. So it doesn't look like the garage from the front of the house, and the doors are kind of on the side. And from the doors to the driveway where you kind of swing in, it's about 40 feet, I believe. And that first 10 feet doesn't see any sunshine. So the rest of the concrete will melt off. Even if we get 3 or 4 inches of snow, that other section will melt off and it just drains into the rock. But that first 10 feet never melts until it gets above, like 50 degrees probably. So you always have to shovel that section. And even after you shovel it or you got the skid steer out there moving a foot of snow, that section still always has clumps of snow and ice that just stay there. And I'm telling you, I think, well, typically from October, but we actually haven't had any snow yet. And it's, about December already. But December this year until probably May or at least April, there's going to be patches of snow and ice on my driveway. And I know it's going to happen. So really, truly consider the driveway and what way it faces if you're in an area that gets a lot of snow and ice. Now, I know that there's other considerations, just like I said, I had for myself, the view and kind of how I wanted the house laid out on the lot overall ultimately was more important to me. So what do we do if we're like, you know what? I want the floor plan this way. Chris, you told me about the south facing driveway, but it just isn't going to work for whatever reason. There are some things you can do. Things that hindsight being 2020, I wish I would have done, but I just didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. I knew better, but I didn't listen to myself. You can have a heated driveway. Now, when you say heated driveway, immediately, if you're anything like me, your mind's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be crazy expensive and I'm not going to be able to afford it. So when we think of heated driveways and it's all the way from the road up this, 500-foot driveway and everything around the house is heated, yes, that can get extremely expensive. But using myself as the example, my driveway is fine, and most of the concrete off of the garage is totally fine. It's just that last 10 feet. So we definitely could have done some electric heating mats underneath the concrete for just that first 10 feet. Would have kept it melted off all the time, and then the rest the sun would have hit, and we would have been fine. So definitely consider and really think about when you're talking with your architect and designer about a south-facing driveway if you're in an area that gets a lot of snow and ice. And then also realize that there are solutions if you decide, man, I got to have it this way, and I know I'm going to sacrifice that convenience. Know that there are things you can do at a cost, of course, to make sure that it still works for you and your family at the end of the day. So another thing we need to think about is what I call zoning for the environment, or thinking about different sections of the floor plan and how they're going to fit into the environment that you're going to build your home in. Now, this isn't just kind of the simple, like, oh, indoors out. Like everybody's seen HGTV. We all know if we're in a beautiful rural setting that we want to feel like the indoors are out and the outdoors are in. We know that. And that's going to be kind of maybe some design trends that we'll talk about in another video. But for right now, I want to talk about a few, I think they're kind of overlooked if I'm being totally honest, a few things. So number one is not just a laundry room, but definitely a laundry mudroom area. Now, a lot of folks, if you've never built a custom home, you've kind of, lived in the production home kind of thing. Maybe if you bought a new build, but it was a production new build. A lot of mudrooms they're kind of small. It's kind of, you walk in the door, there's a couple little shoe cubbies, and there's like 3 coat hook kind of thing. And it's all whited paint, and it looks all modern and trendy. And that's the mudroom. What I'll tell you that I found out from experience, and I think a lot of our clients have, is that if you are in a little bit more rural environment, or you're just spending a lot of time outside, you need a bigger mudroom area. And mudroom is just kind of the term that we use for it, but it's kind of that drop zone area. And I think this is very family size dependent too. So you're probably going to want a place for muddy boots. And depending on how many people in your family, probably a lot of muddy boots. You don't want that stuff getting tracked all through the house. You want a lot of places for coats, not just 3 little hooks. You kind of want it to be this drop zone that is super functional with a lot of storage built into it, but it has a little bit of space to it. And I think some people, they're concerned about, I don't live in the mudroom, obviously, so I don't want to suck up a bunch of square footage of my house by making it all mudroom area. And this is something I think it's just a little bit of a mindset shift you have to get over, because yes, you don't live in your mudroom, but you do spend a lot of time in it because you go through it multiple times a day. And anything that you can do to make it a little bit more convenient for you, it's worth it at the end of the day. So thinking about a floor plan that has a drop zone mudroom area that's maybe a little bit bigger than you think it needs to be, I think it's a huge benefit. And I highly encourage people, when you're laying out your floor plan, to just maybe say, you know what, we're going to use a little bit more square footage in this area than we thought we were going to, but it's going to be worth it at the end of the day if you design it right. So again, the whole point of this is to make sure you're asking the right questions whenever you're talking to your architect or designer. And whenever you and your wife or whoever is sketching out this on the back of a napkin, you're thinking through some of this stuff and just asking the question. Maybe it's right for you, maybe it's not, but I feel like it's something a lot of people overlook. Another thing is we talk about kind of the environment and really making sure our house fits the environment. Think about covered outdoor spaces. So this is something that a lot of people will chop off kind of the build really fast, because it's usually a budgetary thing. Understandably, nobody has an unlimited budget. So a lot of people will say, oh, that back deck was going to be covered, but now because of cost or whatever the case is, we're not going to do a covered back deck. We're just going to make it all open. And when you first start out, it's not that bad because you're, depending on what time of year you move into your house, you think, oh, I'll put all this furniture out here. I got this really nice, couch or whatever it is that's outdoor couch, and everything's really nice. But the fact is, you are, in my opinion, you're drastically limiting the amount of time you will use those spaces if it's all uncovered. And if you have a little tiny space that's covered, like you'll see this a lot too, where that just with the overall layout of the house, there might be a couple parts of the house that kind of jut to the back and there's a little kind of cutout in the middle and that part will be covered, but that's it. And then it's a big wraparound deck on the backside. So truth be told, I feel like the uncovered space it's not wasted, but it's definitely not utilized nearly as much as the covered space. And again, I'll use myself as an example for this. We have kind of a pretty good mix of a very large covered space and then also uncovered space as well. And we hardly ever use the uncovered space. And this is in Colorado where it's pretty nice out a lot of the time. It's pretty sunny. We're in the trees, so there's not a lot of wind that we have to worry about. But just that covered space, it just feels a little bit cozier. You still get you still see the sunshine outside, but it just feels a little bit better. So I encourage people to think about that outdoor space and don't let it kind of the covered part. Yeah, there's a cost to it for sure, but don't just chop it off right away. Really think through, is there anything else I can do to save my budget a little bit? Because I'm telling you, if you don't have any or very, very limited covered outdoor space to utilize, you just won't be outside as much. And especially, again, we're probably building a custom luxury home in a kind of a little bit more rural environment, or at least an environment that has a lot of nice scenery to look at. So you want to be outside a lot of the time. So you want to make it as comfortable as possible. Now, this floor plan consideration, it's a little bit newer, but I think it's worth mentioning because we've even had some folks that have looked to do very large scale remodels to accomplish that because they didn't do this whenever they built. And it is multi-generational living. Now, I know a lot of people are saying right now, like, there's no way in heck my in-laws are going to come live with me whenever they get older or whatever the case may be. But I want you to really think about this because, number one, life is unexpected. You never know what's going to happen. But this space can also be, until that multi-generational thing happens, or maybe it never does, it can still be an amazing space for guests, whether they're there for a weekend or they're staying for a couple weeks, maybe on vacation. So when we look at seven-figure luxury, true custom homes in Colorado, like I said, it's a trend that we're seeing a lot of. And honestly, if you plan it right at the build, it's not this huge exuberant cost that you have to put in, additional costs you have to put into the house. So when we talk about multi-generational spaces, what are we talking about? So really think about, there's all kinds of terms, it's a mother-in-law suite, it's a granny flat, whatever it is. It's another space in the house that someone can truly live self-contained, if you will, in that space. So we have a separate entrance from the exterior. We have a suite, bathroom, bedroom combination, and we have some type of cooking ability. Now, there's a lot of local codes and zoning things you have to consider with this. So in some areas, you can't have a cooktop. You can't have an oven in a second space unless the house is zoned the specific or the lot's zoned a certain way. So definitely things to look into, but there are certainly workarounds around that as well to still accomplish multi-generational space or just a really freaking nice space for your guests to come stay in. And that's a key point too, because I've seen people make this mistake is, oh, my budget's getting high. Okay, we got to make sure we can control that. But don't build out a separate living space only to just go super duper cheap with all the finishes so it doesn't match the rest of the house. You need to make sure that that secondary suite, multi-generational space, whatever you want to call it, your guest suite, is on the same par finishes-wise as the rest of the house. You don't want to build a seven-figure custom home and then have this one spot that just doesn't match at all. Cabinetry, flooring, fixtures, whatever it is, lighting, everything needs to match and flow with the rest of the house. So like I said, this can be a cost, but it doesn't have to be an exuberant cost depending on how large you make that secondary suite, how many amenities you put into it. So we've seen some that it is truly the basement of a house. It's a walkout basement, and it looks like a second house. Kitchen area, large island associated with it, multiple bedrooms, living room, obviously multiple bathrooms attached to the bedrooms. It really truly is a separate house in the basement. And then some of them, it might be, hey, we have this space above the garage because we wanted to do a 12-12 pitch roof. So we have a steep roof pitch above the garage. We like that aesthetic of it. man, there's all this space up above the garage. It's kind of wasted. Can we talk to our designer and our architect, and can we have a truss plan design? So now that's open space. We can figure out how to get some stairs up there. Maybe we have a 600 square foot space up there now that typically would have been kind of wasted space, but now we can have a large studio apartment. Maybe we have a kitchenette up there, an attached bathroom. So it really becomes its own separate space. And this is something sometimes I kind of say personally what I have seen happen with my family in our houses. The house we're in currently, it's exactly what we did. We found space above the garage, and now it's a 600 square foot apartment that normally was just going to be wasted space. So don't give up on a secondary apartment guest suite just because you think, you know what, my in-laws or my family, they're never going to live with me. We have a plan outside of our house for that because, like I said, things change. You never know. And it's just good space to add if you do it right and you design it in the house from the beginning. You might be saving yourself a huge remodel cost down the road. Now for a bonus one. So a lot of people, when you think floor plan, you're thinking about the house. You're thinking about the laundry room, the kitchen, the master suite, the living room, all these things. But are you thinking about the garage? Because I would say that in general, I'm going to stereotype a little bit, but folks that are building custom homes typically have a few toys that they like to have. So I'm not talking about having some huge, massive RV garage with a 16-foot door. Maybe you want to do that. I don't know. But whenever you design the house, try to integrate a few things into the garage space that give you a little bit of extra space that maybe you didn't think you were going to be able to do. And it's a lot less expensive for garage square footage typically than it is for the main house square footage. So a couple things. Do larger garage doors. Do the ones that don't do the 7-foot tall garage doors. Do 8-foot tall garage doors. Do a little bit wider garage doors so that whenever you're backing your truck in, you don't have to fold in the mirrors and just kind of hope that you're going in the right spot. You can actually back your truck in without doing that. You don't have to worry about hitting the top of the garage door if you have something larger you want to put in. If you have some ATVs or something like that you want to store, think about the overall garage space. You might be thinking, okay, I need a 3-car garage because my wife has a car, I have a car, and our kiddo's going to start driving soon. 3-car garage. But maybe you think, you know what? It's actually going to be more cost beneficial to add on a 4th stall in the garage if we can make it all look aesthetically pleasing, right? Because maybe you don't have the ability to do an outbuilding, or it's going to be less expensive to do that. And now you have a garage bay to store some of your toys in. Another thing that's super popular right now is a home gym in the garage. And I think this kind of started a lot during COVID, honestly, because gyms were shut down. You couldn't go anywhere. But you don't want to just say, oh, I have a 3-car garage, and then you just take one of those garage stalls, don't put a car in it, and then put your gym there. Try to design it a certain way where maybe you have a certain part of the garage that's extra deep, or maybe it kind of tucks back behind some storage in the garage where you can still put all your vehicles in, but you still have space for a dedicated gym area that has easy access to it. So you're not trying to back a car out or squeeze between the wall and the car just to get to your workout area. So garage space is often part of the floor plan design process that's overlooked. And I highly encourage you to think about some of these extras that you might want to have, because again, that garage square footage is less expensive mostly compared to your main level living square footage. So designing that perfect Colorado home means designing with the elements in your specific lifestyle. Think about that view corridor we talked about, south-facing access, a large functional mudroom, maybe even a generational suite. And you've got to remember that the architect you choose is critical to this whole phase of the build, especially if they're not in your local area. So if you are in Colorado, specifically in the Pikes Peak area, and you're thinking about a luxury custom home build, please don't hesitate. Reach out, call, text, email anytime. I'll do anything I can to help you get the ball rolling.